What if the very name of Illinois wasn't born from its people, but from the echo of a language that wasn't even their own? What if every time you spoke the word, Illinois, you were speaking a story that began with native voices, twisted by foreign tongues, and carried into our world today? This is not just a name on a map. It's a reminder of survival, of loss, and of how words can outlive the people who first spoke them. Illinois, known today as the beating heart of America. From the steel veins of Chicago to the endless prairies that stretch across the horizon, its name feels as familiar as the land itself. But beneath that name lies a history far older than statehood, far older than skyscrapers, far older even than the nation itself. Long before the French explorers carved their way down the Mississippi, long before Illinois became the 21st state in 1818, this land was already alive with voices. Voices that belonged to a people who called themselves Illiniwek, proud tribes who roamed these rivers, built villages, and lived by the rhythms of the land. And it was from them that the name we speak today first began. Long before Illinois was a state, or even a name on a European map, it was home to a powerful alliance of native peoples. They called themselves the Illiniwek, a confederation of tribes bound together not only by blood, but by shared culture, trade, and survival. Among them were the Kaskaskia, the Cahokia, the Peoria, the Michigameya, and others. Together, they occupied vast stretches of land, villages tucked along the Mississippi River, communities thriving in the fertile plains, and trading routes that stretched for miles across the heart of the continent. The Illiniwek weren't just hunters and warriors. They were farmers, artisans, and storytellers. Corn, beans, and squash grew in their fields. Their homes, often made of wood and bark, rose along the great rivers. They built societies rooted in family, respect, and ceremony, where every generation passed down wisdom to the next. But the most powerful legacy they carried wasn't just their land or their way of life. It was their name. The word, Illiniwek, has its roots in the Algonquian language family. Early interpretations suggest it meant, the men, or, the people. Some translations carry an even more poetic sense, ordinary speakers, or, real people, simple words, yet profound. For the Illiniwek, identity was not carved in stone monuments but spoken in language, carried in the breath of their name. To them, it was not just a label. It was a declaration of existence. We are here, we are the people. And for centuries, that name echoed across the rivers and prairies of this land. Every council fire, every hunting ground, every treaty between tribes reinforced who they were, the Illiniwek. A people defined not by walls or crowns, but by their connection to the earth and to each other. But history is rarely kind. When outsiders arrived, they heard the name Illiniwek through their own ears, foreign ears that struggled to capture the sound, the meaning, the spirit behind the word. And in that moment of translation, something was lost. In the late 1600s, the still untamed rivers of North America became pathways for European explorers. Among the first to pass through the land of the Illiniwek were the French, Jesuit missionary father Jacques Marquette and cartographer Louis Joliet. In 1673, they journeyed down the Mississippi River, mapping its bends and recording the peoples they met. When they came across the Illiniwek, they were struck not only by the size of the confederation but by the sound of its name. But here lies the collision. The French tongue struggled to capture the true sound of Illiniwek. Their ears filtered it through their own language, bending syllables to fit familiar patterns. Over time, the name morphed into Illinois. In French writing, the final OIS carried a soft, elegant sound, something like Illinois. But when the word traveled into English mouths, the French nuance was stripped away. The silent S remained, but the pronunciation shifted, hardening into Illinois. In that subtle change, a piece of the original voice was lost. This was more than mispronunciation. It was transformation. The French had not only charted rivers and lands, they had charted identity. By writing Illinois onto their maps, they fixed a version of the name into European memory, a version that would survive long after the Illiniwek themselves were driven from their homelands. The irony is haunting. A name meant to mean the people, reshaped by a foreign tongue until even the people themselves might not have recognized it. Yet this was the power of colonial languages. Words could be recorded, redefined, and imposed, carrying authority that silenced the voices they claimed to preserve. And so, Illinois entered the European world. A name born of native identity, yet forever marked by French interpretation. But the story of this word did not end in the 17th century. It continued to evolve, passed from French explorers to British records, and eventually into American statehood. Each retelling, each translation, carried it further from its origin, until the name was no longer just a translation, but a symbol of how history itself can be rewritten. Once the French etched the word, Illinois, onto their maps, the name began a journey of its own, detached from the voices that first gave it life. When Britain seized control of French territories after the 7 Years' War in 1763, the name carried over into English records. By then, the spelling was fixed, but the sound had already begun to shift. The elegant French, Illinois, softened into the more familiar English, Illinois. As the United States expanded westward, the land once belonging to the Illiniivic became part of a new nation's frontier. Traders, settlers, and soldiers all adopted the name Illinois, often without knowing, or caring, where it came from. When Illinois officially entered the Union in 1818 as the 21st state, the word had already lost nearly all connection to the people who inspired it. By then, the Illiniivic Confederation had been devastated. Disease brought by Europeans, warfare with rival tribes, and forced displacement stripped them of their strength and numbers. Their villages emptied, their presence faded. And yet, paradoxically, their name endured, preserved not in their language, but in the records of those who replaced them. Illinois became more than a word, it became an idea, reshaped with every era. In the early 19th century, it symbolized opportunity, fertile farmland for pioneers, a new beginning on the American frontier. By the late 1800s, it meant progress. Railroads cutting through prairies, Chicago rising as a hub of commerce and industry. By the 20th century, it was synonymous with modernity. Skyscrapers scraping the sky, steel and labor fueling a growing nation. Through it all, the name Illinois adapted, surviving revolutions, wars, and waves of immigration. But what it represented was no longer the Illiniivic, nor the French explorers who first reimagined it. It had become something else entirely, a vessel, carrying fragments of history forward while leaving others behind. And today, when we hear the word Illinois, we inherit not just the story of its past, but the question of what that past means in the present. Today, Illinois is a name recognized across the world. For some, it brings to mind the towering skyline of Chicago, the city of broad shoulders, birthplace of blues and jazz, a melting pot of cultures from every corner of the globe. For others, it is the vast farmland stretching endlessly across the prairies, where corn and soybeans feed not just the nation, but countries far beyond. And for many, it represents history in motion, the land of Abraham Lincoln, the proving ground of industry, labor, and resilience. Yet for all the modern meanings Illinois has gathered, its name still carries with it the faint imprint of the Illiniivic. Even though the tribes themselves were scattered and diminished, their name lives on every time it is spoken, etched into the identity of millions who now call the state home. Illinois is more than just geography, it is memory. A memory layered like the soil of its prairies. At the surface, a modern powerhouse of culture and commerce. Beneath, the remnants of French explorers who reshaped the name, and deeper still, the enduring voice of the Illiniivic, the original people who declared themselves simply, the people. But this is where the legacy becomes complicated. Most who say the word, Illinois, today do so without knowing its origin, without realizing it is both a monument and a misunderstanding. It is a tribute that has, over time, become detached from those it was meant to honor. And yet, perhaps that is precisely why it matters. Because names are not just words. They're vessels. They carry the weight of history, sometimes proudly remembered, sometimes forgotten, sometimes reshaped so many times that their roots seem almost unreachable. Illinois reminds us that the past is never fully gone. It is present every time the name is spoken, even if few stop to ask where it came from. And it is in asking that question, pausing to remember what this word once meant, that we find its true power. The story of Illinois is not just the story of a state. It is the story of how names survive, even when the people who first spoke them are nearly erased from the land. It is the story of how language can bend, fracture, and transform, yet still carry echoes of its origin. When we say, Illinois, today, we are speaking across centuries. We are invoking the Illiniwek, the people who once thrived on these rivers and plains. We are repeating a word reshaped by French tongues, forever marked by the silent S they left behind. And we are living in the legacy of a name that has traveled through native memory, colonial maps, American statehood, and modern identity. But more than anything, the name Illinois reminds us of a truth that is larger than history books. That names are not accidents. They are bridges. They connect us to cultures that came before us, even if we do not always recognize them. They carry stories, even when those stories have been altered, shortened, or half forgotten. Illinois is a state of skyscrapers and farmland, of invention and struggle, of progress and memory. Yet at its core, its name is still a whisper from the past, asking us not to forget where it began. And if one state name holds this much history, how many more secrets lie hidden in the names we speak every single day? If the name Illinois can hold centuries of memory, native voices, French interpretation, American transformation, then imagine what stories are hidden in the names of the other 49 states. Each one carries its own echoes, its own collisions of cultures, its own forgotten beginnings. That's why this is only the beginning. Together, we'll journey across the map of America, unlocking the hidden stories behind every state name, stories of people, language, survival, and legacy. So if you believe history lives in the words we speak, join us. Like this video, share it with others who love uncovering the past, and subscribe so you don't miss the next chapter in this journey. Because names are not just words. They are stories, and it's time we told them all.